Today's program has been pre-recorded, so our phone lines are not open. Well, hey there, friends. Welcome to another exciting edition of Equipped with Chris Brooks. I am absolutely thrilled that you've joined us today. Do me a favor, strap on your seatbelt. We're going to navigate through the contours of culture, as always, with the lens of the biblical worldview on. But before we do, let me remind you, this is the day that the Lord has made. He has given it as a gift so that you and I can rejoice and be glad in it. So let's do just that. Let's follow the words of the Apostle Paul. Let's rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. Well, why are some of the world's biggest skeptics becoming vocal converts of Christianity? We're going to talk about that today, and I know your heart is going to be encouraged. Well, it was 1963 when Time magazine released its epic and memorable edition of its magazine. Now, picture this if you can. I know this is radio, but picture a black backdrop with block letters, these white block letters, really crisp, really clean, simply asking one question: is God dead? The argument at the time the Time magazine wanted to make is that science had displaced the need for God. Well, since then, there have been several powerful movements of the gospel, what we would call revivals or awakenings, certainly moves of God. And there's something brewing in our present moment that is causing some of the world's most noted intellectuals who have denied Christianity to profess now that Jesus Christ really is Lord. An article that really has made an imprint upon me that I read not too long ago was written by Nathan Guy for Christianity Today. It's simply entitled, Some of Christianity's Biggest Skeptics Are Becoming Vocal Converts. Well, who's Nathan Guy? Dr. Nathan Guy is the executive director of the David E. Smith Bioethics and Human Dignity Initiative at Harding University. In addition, he serves the College of Bible and Ministry in a part-time capacity as an associate professor of philosophy and theology and ethics. He's also a full-time preaching minister for the Westside Church of Christ in Searcy, Arkansas. Dr. Guy joins me now. How are you, brother?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I am doing really, really well. I think that so often there are trends that are happening right up under our noses that we miss. And I'm always intrigued by those who see something forming by way of a movement and they're able to name it and capture it. What caused you to notice that something was happening here among the intellectual critics of Christianity?
Well, my story of how I got interested in this goes way back. So I studied philosophy in undergrad, and then I went off to work on a master's degree in philosophy at a school where the entire department were atheists.
Wow.
And we were studying ethics and philosophy in a department where we're looking for the foundations of ethics and morality. And I just got so intrigued as I was looking at how people go about assuming things like equality and freedom and dignity in human beings. And then you go looking for an explanation as to what is the basis for those things. And the one that makes the most sense, which is also one of the most ancient arguments for that, is rooted squarely, in God, and particularly a Christian view of reading Genesis 1 and 2. And so that's where that story starts for me, and then my schooling and my studies, and then my dissertation and so forth.
You start your article out, and I just commend everyone. Go to our social platforms. We have the article there. Dr. Guy, you start your article out by noting that 50 years ago, there was a movement that brought a lot of people into the faith. It was called the Jesus Movement. What were some of the unique features of the Jesus movement, and maybe what were some of the criticisms?
The Jesus movement, as it was called, this is 1971 when Christianity Today had an editorial call the new Christians. And there was no author's name, so I'm guessing it was Carl Henry who wrote the article. Just said that these were offbeat people, as an offbeat group. They were, according to the criticism, super subjective. That the focus was on what you might say. Sometimes we talk about the head versus heart split, and the argument here is that it was a heart movement. And so the criticism was, you're bringing people to faith based on the emotive side, but what about cognitive knowledge?
Yeah.
Now, that probably was a bit unfair to them, but you understand the argument. Well, fast forward 50 years, and 50 years later, we've got the exact opposite. We have people who are saying, look, I don't know much about what you're talking about on the emotive side, but the intellectual arguments lead me to what Christianity is claiming.
You know what's really interesting about that? I know a lot of folks who came to Christ through the Jesus movement, and for those who maybe are a little bit unfamiliar with it, that popular film, The Jesus Revolution, kind of captures some of the major folks and figures in that movement, and it certainly was a fruitful movement on many fronts of people coming to faith. It was also criticized, rightfully so, for some of the emotive things that were happening. And there was a kind of an anti-intellectualism bent to it, that all of the faith was about experience and the move of the Spirit, but not so much the intellectualism of what you write about. Now, fast forward 50 years, what your article captures is the fact that God is moving in a way that's bringing in almost folks at the other end of the spectrum. Is that right?
That's right. And so what we're looking at here are people who are saying, I'm a scholar. I read for a living. I do logical argumentation, and I'm trying to find the basis for these things that I value. And the clear answer seems to be what Christianity as a culture, Christian culture, is rooted in. And I can't seem to separate the fruit from the roots. And that's what I'm finding.
I love it. We're going to get into some of these major figures, folks like A.N. Wilson, Tom Holland, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. But let me just say this. One of the reasons why I was encouraged by the article is the privilege I get to talk to university students. And so often, I remember being a university student, Dr. Guy, walking into the classroom, someone with 3 letters after their name is standing up in front of the classroom. And if that person is a secular humanist, if that person is an atheist, if that person believes in evolutionary biology, then odds are not only are they not a follower of Christ, they may even be hostile to that. And here you are, an 18, 19, 20-year-old. How intimidating is that to say, well, my youth pastor told me that Jesus is real? How do you contend for your faith in a university setting? Or maybe you're a professional in a profession in which saying that you are a Christian, Bible-believing Christian, an evangelical Christian might mean career suicide. One of the things that I love about this is it just is a reminder to us that there are people who are brilliant at their fields, but yet have come because of their intellectual investigation to believe that Jesus Christ is Lord of all. But let me just say, from a historic perspective, Dr. Guy, that's not a new phenomenon, is that?
No, it is not. In fact, if you study philosophy of religion, or if you study philosophy at all, and you're trying to read the great philosophers, you can't help but intersect with people whose minds were shaped by reflections on deity and specifically theism. And so, even at universities that you wouldn't think of as having a Christian basis, you're studying philosophy and you're trying to study the history of philosophy, you're going to be reading people like Thomas Aquinas. And so you can't help but recognize the river runs right through what we're talking about.
From Galileo to Sir Isaac Newton to points in between, history is replete with men and women who were brilliant at their fields, but yet followers of Christ and those who profess that God does exist. Let's talk about A.N. Wilson and just really quickly give an introduction.
Sure. So A.N. Wilson was an Oxford student, classmate actually of Richard Dawkins, and he wrote a book just to kind of show you where he was on the spectrum religiously. He wrote a book called Against Religion. I mean, he's really trying to lay it out there for you. You know, this is why we don't need God, or why we should try to live without it. And so he really shocked a lot of people in 2009 when he wrote an article called Why I Believe Again. And the substance of what he says is that it just became obvious that we're not just collections of meat. He says there's meaning and purpose and connectivity. Uh, he ends up trying to use an analogy, and he says, I realized that my former atheism was like someone who can't hear music or can't appreciate the language of love because the complexities of life and the hunger for something more drives us to conclude that there is, in fact, something greater than ourselves in whose image we are made.
I
And
love
yeah,
I love that. You know, he writes this article for the New Statesman and professes his faith in Jesus, even though he had told others that they should try to live without faith or belief. He goes on to say that he could not. And I don't believe any of us rightly can. We're going to talk about that, why faith in God really is the grounding for all ethics. One of the other encouragements as we go to break that I want you to get out of this article is that maybe you're dealing with someone that you would label a hard case. Well, A.N. Wilson is Exhibit A for a hard case. Here's a man that writes an entire book against religion and why we should live without it. He was not able to resist the grace of God. Grace of God is irresistible, even for those who are hard cases in your life. I want you to find out more by going to our website, equipradio.org. You can also find Dr. Guy's article that I encourage you to read on all of our social platforms. That's Equip Radio. We'll be right back with more of Equipped right after this. Do you struggle to connect with your adult child? How do you navigate the pain in a broken parent-child relationship? Dr. Kathy Cook's book, Resolve Conflict and Find Peace and Hope with Adult Children, offers compassionate guidance with real conversation strategies that work so that you can move from conflict to restoration. Request your copy today when you give a gift of any amount to Equip. Give at 888-644-4144 or give online at equipradio.org. Chris Brooks here, reminding you that today's program is pre-recorded and we won't be taking your calls. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to Equip with Chris Brooks. Today I'm talking to Dr. Nathan Guy. He's the author of a recently published article in Christianity Today entitled Some of Christianity's Biggest Skeptics Are Becoming Vocal Converts. I encourage you to read the article. It will encourage your heart, in particular if you have somebody who seems hardened against Christianity, far from the gospel. Maybe they have strongly and vehemently rejected your witness to Christ, and maybe you're on the verge of giving up on Christ. I just want to remind you that there is power in the gospel, and I want to encourage your heart to remain faithful even in the hard cases. Find out more by going to our social platforms at Equip Radio. Also, if we can pray for you today, maybe you have been listening to the claims of Christ and you've come to a place where you say, I believe. If that's you, dial this number, 888-NEED-HIM. That's 888-NEED-HIM. Dr. Guy, you'll know this famous quote that ideas have consequences. A good friend of mine, John Stonestreet, says, and bad ideas have victims. In some ways, this seems to be a recognition that atheistic values actually leads to a pretty bleak and discouraging life of despair. Is that what we're seeing here?
Well, it's an interesting way that you worded that, and I would want to be very careful with the way I say this. I have known non-believers who lived very good lives. They love their families, they love their children, they're good citizens. I have known some non-believers whose lives put some believers' lives to shame, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
So it's not at all trying to say that a person who's an atheist can't or doesn't lead a good life. It's the reason, the basis upon which we say, and you ought to live the way I live as well, or this is why this is good, or why this is true. The basis is hard to find from an atheistic worldview. My favorite quote along this line is from an atheist who was brutally honest, a man named Bertrand Russell, gave a speech in which he said, since there is no God, there really is no meaning or purpose objectively in life. All the best things that you experience are going to die in heat death one day. And he
Wow.
says, therefore, the best form, the best way to plant yourself in a good future is to hang on to, and this is his quote, the firm foundation of unyielding despair. And I've got to tell you, as horrid as that sounds, it was brutally honest. That seems to be the end result. If you start with the idea that meaning and purpose is constructed, not
Yeah.
objective.
Well, many people would even argue too, Dr. Guy, that those non-Christian atheists who live fulfilling lives or deeply significant and meaningful lives that often do so because they are borrowing from the ethics of Christianity, all while denying God.
Well, another person I'd like to quote along that line, there was a man named Louis Poyman, and
Yes.
if you studied philosophy at, let's say you went to Oxford or Cambridge, and you decided you wanted to study philosophy, he's the guy who was writing all those textbooks. And I have
Mhm.
no idea what his religious background was. He was buried. His funeral took place at a Unitarian Universalist church, so that could mean anything. Okay, I don't know his religious background, but he wrote an article in which he said we are living off of a borrowed religious, his wording, metaphysic. Or what he means is we're just living off the fumes and the fruit of roots that come to us from our Christian background.
This approach to a man centric way of seeing life often leaves us without a deeper sense of meaning. But as glorious as A.N. Wilson's conversion is, one person does not a trend make. You need more than just one person to say there's a trend here. So, who is Tom Holland and what is his testimony?
Okay, so Tom Holland is a very well-known historian. He's writing both popular works and other works along that line, and he was somebody who also shocked a lot of his fellow friends in 2016 when he wrote an article saying why I was wrong about Christianity. Now, you may be more familiar with his book Dominion, but this comes out before that book. He was researching ancient Greece and Rome, and he said, these Caesars and these generals, they'll kill hundreds of people without batting an eye. They will treat people the way that serves their own interests with no basic understanding that there's something like human dignity inherent in someone. And he said, why is it that I think that dignity is inherent in every person?
Yeah.
Why do I think that equality is a fundamental value? And he said, I didn't get that from Greece or Rome. I get that from Christianity. And so he found himself being pulled to say, what is the foundation and basis of what I hold most dear?
One of the great studies in ethics and history is to look at the historical values, ethics, and beliefs that have stood as the foundation for Western civilization. And to ask the question, where do these come from? To put a different way, could the West have even flourished, came into existence if it wasn't for the presuppositions that come from a theistic worldview? So that's a great study. I would also say that there's something to be said in these testimonies Dr. Guy, of men and women who really embody the values of the Christian faith. That this isn't just the pure intellectualism of seeing these values unlived. Talk about the role in some of these cases of reading stories or seeing the lives of believers who are actually living out the teachings of Christ.
Well, I was thinking, for example, A.N. Wilson, he was reading biographies of people who gave their lives for the poor and for outcasts, and they did it because of their faith. He was reading Bonhoeffer, and I believe he was reading Francis of Assisi, and he said, I found it impossible not to realize that all life, all being derives from God, as these who gave their lives demonstrate. And so watching the way people were willing to give their lives for each other is in contrast, for example, to what, Tom Holland also points out, which is the values that we would have gotten from a place like ancient Greece or Rome, where the poor and the weak have no intrinsic value. Instead of giving your life for them, you're taking their life from them. And he just says that contrast is so obvious.
I want you to call the number 888-NEED-HIM. Maybe you're listening and you would label yourself an intellectual person, a thinking person, a person who has maybe a strong academic background, educational background, someone whom evidence really matters, that you're not going to follow a faith or a belief just because the herd does, but you would call yourself a free thinker. But as you listen to these stories, I invite you to simply investigate the lives of these people. One person that doesn't show up in your article that also has been really noteworthy in my life of stories that I've read is Antony Flew. Mm-hmm. Dr. Antony Flew was a noted atheist, maybe the world's leading atheist for many a decade, became famous for his exchanges with C.S. Lewis, where at least at one point some argued that he sent Lewis away baffled in confusion after a publicly embarrassing exchange that they had with one another. But yet later on in life, he comes to faith and writes a book that says God does exist.
Can I tell you a great story about Antony Flew?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so the year was 1976. There was a debate in Texas, and Antony Flew was on one side, and the guy on the other was a man named Tom Warren, and he was a philosophy teacher at the same place that I eventually went and got a master's degree, which is a Harding School of Theology. I teach at Harding. He was a teacher at Harding. He was debating Antony Flew in 76. And before the debate, Dr. Warren gave 3 questions to Dr. Flew and said, I just want you to answer these questions. Question number 1, is there objective moral right and wrong that transcends any given society, any time, any place? Well, being a good atheist, with no illusions of a transcendent moral lawgiver, Flew said no. Okay, question 2. When the Nazis tortured little children, putting them in boxcars coated with quicklime so they died an agonizingly slow death, was that wrong?
Yeah.
Being a sincere and self-respecting man, Flew said, yes, of course that was wrong. And now it was time for the trap, right? Yeah. Question 3, what law did they violate? It wasn't German law. German law was to obey the Fuhrer. And you can't appeal to English law. They weren't under English law. And before 1948, there really was no United Nations with codified and ratified laws. So what law did they violate? And Flew wrote in international law, see Nuremberg. Wow. Let me tell you why that's fascinating. Because Nuremberg is where they tried the Nazis for war crimes. But wouldn't you know it, Justice Robert Jackson, American Supreme Court Justice, was the prosecuting attorney.
Wow.
And in his closing speech, he said the reason why we need to try them and convict them is because, quote, there is a higher law that transcends time and place. And I just think that's a fascinating story. Good. And yeah. I don't know how you get out of that one.
Yeah, that's so good. And I love that you can't find yourself standing on firm footing for an oughtness concerning morality while denying God, the moral lawgiver. Friends, we're just scratching the surface. When we come back, we'll talk about arguably the most popular female atheist to come to Christ in 100 years. You don't want to change that down. Much more to come next up on Equip with Chris Brooks. In today's rapidly changing culture, Christians need solid biblical guidance more than ever. That's our mission here at Equip, to provide biblical wisdom for life's toughest questions. When you step in as an equipper, you're not just giving. Your monthly support helps to offer clarity and hope to a confused and anxious culture. And you'll get exclusive resources and updates from us all year long. Join our team of monthly supporters today. Call 888-644-4144 or visit equipradio.org. Chris Brooks here, reminding you that today's program is pre-recorded. While we won't be taking calls, we do want to connect with you on social media. Welcome back to Equip with Chris Brooks. My guest today, Dr. Nathan Guy. We're having a fascinating conversation about his recent article in Christianity Today, simply entitled, "Some of Christianity's Biggest Skeptics Are Becoming Vocal Converts." It chronicles how noted intellectual atheists and those who have been critical of the Christian faith historically are coming to Christianity and are confessing faith in Christ. Nathan joins me now. Dr. Guy, I should have started by asking you to share with us a little bit about your work at Harding University. Can you share a little bit about what you do at the David E. Smith Bioethic and Human Dignity Initiative?
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up. So Harding is a 100-year-old school. It's in a small town, Searcy, Arkansas, and but we've got students from over 60 countries and virtually all the states, and we have over 100 majors and 40 grad programs, and so it's a really active place. And the initiative, which we've slightly changed one of the words there, Chris. It's now the Healthcare Ethics and Human Dignity
Okay.
Initiative, but still rooted in David Smith, who is the progenitor for all of this. But the initiative gets to work at both the undergrad level and the grad level, and we really infuse a deep, substantive, meaningful sense of Christian ethics in every department across the schools. And so the idea is when you graduate, whether it's degree in theology, and you want to be a chaplain, or it's in allied health and you're going to go straight into medicine or nursing, or whatever it is, you've thought through some of the difficult ethical questions that will come up and how to see them through the lens of Christ and to treat people with human dignity. It's a fantastic initiative that just started. We're bringing speakers in every year. We've got Scott Ray coming in.
Oh, that's great.
This month, and then down the road, we've got some other people lined up we're really excited about.
Well, we love Scott Ray, friend of the program, and we love that project that you're overseeing. So, friends, find out more about Dr. Guy, the work that he's doing, as well as his article on our social media platforms, or by going to our website, equipradio.org. That's equipradio.org. Well, is God dead? That was the question in the 1960s, as some argued that science and intellectualism had displaced the need for God. But now we live in a day and age where many are coming to Christ out of academia, from an intellectual background, which serves us in this way. It points to the fact that the gospel is powerful to transform the lives of men and women from all backgrounds, but it also is a reminder to us that you don't have to check your brain at the door when you come to Christ. And maybe you're a person who is a thinking person. You have to have coherence in life. The gospel is not only compelling and compassionate, it is also coherent. Who is Ayaan Hirsi Ali? And tell us her story of coming to faith.
Okay, so Ayaan Hirsi Ali is a research fellow at Stanford, and incredible background. In fact, Christopher Hitchens, who was one of the well-known four horsemen of the New Atheists, once described her as the most important public intellectual probably to come out of Africa. Those were his words. And so you can understand how it was a true shock to the establishment that would have thought that she's going to be a representative of new atheism in 2023 when she came out with an article, "Why I Am Now a Christian." And it's the very same story we've been looking at with both Tom Holland and Ian Wilson. She said, "I was looking for the basis for human values that I hold so dear. I think life is so important, and equality and freedom and dignity, these are sacrosanct. And when I go looking for the basis of why do I believe that? Why should you believe that? Why is this something that isn't dependent on what, people happen to say, but rather is always true regardless of what the majority thinks?" She said it led her straight to Christ. In fact, she says if you're looking for meaning and purpose in life, Christianity has it all. And that's powerful to me.
I think that's extremely powerful, and I think it should be noted that it was her counselor who walked her through a series of questions to help her to process through this deep sense of despair she was feeling. Ayaan Hirsi Ali had come to what can be described in no other way but an existential crisis in her own personal life. And her counselor said, "You need hope. You need faith." And she responded, I can't have that because I reject God. And her counselor was wise enough to ask this question: if there was a God you could believe in, what characteristics would that God bear? And so she began to describe the type of God she could worship, she could follow. And much to her surprise, after she compiled that list, she realized she had just described the God of the Bible. Mm-hmm. She had just described Jesus. And so for many of us, what a powerful witness and reminder of the fact that Jesus is worth following. And yet, when I read her story, it seems to be just as intertwined with her concerns about what's happening in the West. What's maybe the pro of this cultural concern, and what would you say would be maybe a con or concern?
Okay, so let me deal with the criticism first because I want to end on a positive note. So, like you said, Richard Dawkins would say that he's essentially Christian, and if Richard Dawkins is Christian, well, then what does it mean to be Christian? Well, what he means, of course, is he likes the fruit of the kind of cultural goods that Christianity has produced. Um, and so what are we talking about when we say things like that? Are we downplaying the gospel? Is it fair to appreciate people's, I guess, grappling after some of the intellectual cultural goods that come about because of Christianity? Or should we say, no, this is a detour, a departure? It pulls us away from the central core, namely naming Christ as Lord and surrendering and all of that. What I would want to say in response is that, and this is just a generous reading, everyone has to begin somewhere. And it may be that in some cases, these are seedlings, right? Attracted to the benefits. But even if that's the case, think throughout the Gospels of the people who were healed by Jesus. I can think of examples of someone who was healed and then Jesus leaves. And the next time Jesus shows up in that neighborhood, there's a throng of people there to hear him speak.
Yeah.
He had a representative who knew nothing more than, I can now walk. My favorite example, of course, John 9. Jesus had a representative in the synagogue who didn't really know anything more than one thing. I was blind, and now I see.
Mm.
And I want to say that these people are able to speak in junior common rooms that you and I may never have a chance to get into. And I want to say, even if they only know one thing, that is, they see truth or beauty or goodness, and those are other names for God, they are speaking and pointing in a direction that's going to, I think, be very helpful.
Scripture records Jesus saying to the apostle Peter, after you've been converted, go back and strengthen the brethren. Maybe you're listening to us and you say, man, I can identify with Ian Wilson. Maybe you say, I am a Tom Holland type figure or an Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Well, let me just tell you that maybe, just maybe, part of your story will be that God saved you so that he could send you back, so that you could bear witness to the same group of intellectuals who rejected Christian faith that you were a part of. Maybe now, as a follower of Jesus Christ, your mission can be to go back and help them to see the reasons that we have for believing that Christ is Lord and worthy of the praise. Maybe the burning question of our day, Dr. Guy, is around the nature of human rights. What makes humans so special, and why should we respect values like freedom and equality? What's your answer to that?
So historically, the whole idea of human dignity was rooted in something deeper, bigger than ourselves, and it's important to acknowledge that. Here's the best example I have. So, 1948, we have coming out of World War II, we have the first sort of Declaration of Human Rights. And the first statement is, we believe all people are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Doesn't that sound great?
Yes.
We believe all people are born free and equal in dignity and rights. But there's no asterisk, there's no footnote, there's no explanation explaining what makes that true. Now, I know that there was a time when some people said, because they wrote it down, that some humans are only 3/5 of a person.
Yeah.
Now, saying it doesn't make it true.
That's right.
Praise God. Okay, so why isn't the opposite also the case? That here we have a statement, we believe all people are born free and equal in dignity and rights. That's wonderful. What makes that true without some basis? And if you take a look at, for example, Peter Singer, very famous atheist philosopher, he says, those things are just made up words. You can give equality to whoever you want and take it from whoever you want. The moral community of equals is whoever we want it to be. And he's famous for saying, if there's a burning house and you have a 2-year-old baby and a 2-year-old orangutan, you have a moral responsibility to save the orangutan.
Yeah.
It's the endangered species, can contribute more to society, can learn sign language. And it's the end result of saying there's no such thing as inherent dignity and value and worth.
Yeah.
And the Declaration of Independence has a very interesting difference with this first statement of human rights I talked about in 1948. Regardless of what the founders actually thought, that's a long, complicated discussion. I just want you to see that they felt the necessity to put an asterisk and a footnote. Listen to the difference between all people are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Listen to this. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. They felt the need to say there has to be a reason why we think people, humans, have inherent dignity and worth. And I just don't think that you can make the statement without some foundation like that.
I love that you did that contrast, because it's so easy to read flattering words and to walk away thinking, oh, this is beautifully stated. But yet, when you step back and you begin to think, what is the foundation, the underpinning that really supports this statement? And where do I see it most actualized? I think that those types of moments lead us to faith in Jesus Christ. We got to take our final break of the day, but these breaks give you opportunity to find out more about our guests and about our resource. Why don't you go to our social pages and read the article that Dr. Guy penned for Christianity Today. And I will also say this, if you're listening to me right now and you're a part of the justice generation, this current generation of young people who want to see all humans flourishing, who have a deep desire to see bad actors called out and wrongs righted, and those things that are broken fixed. I think Christianity is worthy of your investigation as well. I especially invite you as a young adult to read Dr. Guy's wonderful article. Find out more at equipradio.org. That's equipradio.org. Not every parenting challenge ends when your kids grow up. Sometimes the hardest season is when they're adults. Resolve Conflict and Find Peace and Hope with Adult Children is a book by Kathy Cook that helps parents grieve what's been lost, reset expectations, and pursue healing with wisdom, prayer, and grace. We'd love to send you a copy today with a gift of any amount to equip. Simply call 888-644-4144 or visit equipradio.org. Welcome back to Equip with Chris Brooks. Maybe you're asking the question, what is the basis of human dignity? Why are human beings special? Why should we celebrate values and ethics like freedom and liberty? We'll talk about that and much more with Dr. Nathan Guy. I would also encourage you to read his book, Finding Locke's God, the theological basis of John Locke's political thought. These are books that are a little bit heady in nature, and the article is as well, but it is written to a particular audience, and maybe you have someone in your life that considers himself to be an intellectual, a reader, a learner, and yet they're resistant to the claims of faith, and you feel intimidated or maybe even ill-equipped to share the gospel with them, or maybe you've been someone who's longed for an intellectually robust expression of the Christian faith. Dr. Guy is a great resource for us towards this end. So read the article, find out more about the book, go to our website, equipradio.org. Dr. Guy, I don't want to leave anyone confused or at all unclear about what is essential for us to believe as Christians. What do we need to believe in order to express genuine faith?
Well, clearly, the faith that the Bible describes, the faith that the early Christians had, was faith in someone, something greater than themselves, whose name is Jesus Christ. That Jesus came in the person, God came in the person of Jesus Christ and died on our behalf. We put our faith and trust in Him, empowered by His Spirit to live out a life that resembles the story that we see in the gospel. And so, our faith is in Him. It's not in our
Yes.
abilities to get it all right, nor is it in all of our intellectual endeavors. As you know, First Corinthians says, Paul looks at the church and he says, just look around. Not many of you who are wise were called. You know, this is not an elite society for intellectuals. It is a call for every human being to belong to the body of Christ. But I'm grateful to know that truth is truth is truth. And what we're seeing is that the people who are studying high, heady, deep intellectual things are saying, I can't get around the fact that Christian claims are true and good and beautiful.
That's so good. I'm grateful for it. You know, to put it simply, you need to believe the Bible's testimony concerning Jesus Christ. And so I would encourage you to investigate that. And if you are a follower of Jesus and you know someone who is investigating that, walk that journey with them. Read one of the Gospels with them, maybe the Gospel of John, and use it to just discuss what's unique here about the Christian worldview. I've been studying lately Dr. Guy the Beatitudes, and I've been doing it from the perspective of Christian anthropology, asking what unique vision of humanity do we get just from studying the Beatitudes. It's a powerful thing to see how you can argue for the intrinsic value of human beings, as Jesus affirms that the poor even have value. You can see how Jesus paves for us a pathway to peace in a polarized world when he commands, love your enemies. You can see the nature of creation when he calls us to be perfect, for your Father in heaven is perfect, that we aren't randomly here. We've been created by an almighty, all-knowing, all-powerful God. So all these things in the Beatitudes. So a lot of different launching off points. But what's your hope? What's your desire for those who read the article?
Well, I hope that it gives you encouragement. The kingdom of God marches on, and God's at work. He is um, letting his truth be known all over the world. We are seeing the fruits of that. Christianity is growing in what you might have thought of as being the most unlikely of places. It's growing in China, it's growing in Saudi Arabia, and it's incredible that there are people turning to faith all over the place. You can get down by looking at the statistics in America. You can get down on the rise of the nuns and what's happening over on our neck of the woods. And I just look for any stories of encouragement where people are saying, I can't help but recognize that there is truth here that I can't escape. And that's what I see in this article. As you know, publishers often pick titles for you. So if I get any flack for calling it all these Christian converts, that wasn't exactly my language. But I hope you'll understand that, we use the phrase Christianity in lots of different senses. Like we talk about Christian culture or Christian country. I think what we mean is the truths that you value most are rooted in a long history, a long tradition that was put there by people who followed the path set by Jesus Christ.
Well, I appreciate you greatly. So grateful that we have had this opportunity. I hope it is the first of many conversations. Thank you for the work you're doing at Harding University. Thank you for your writing as well. And thank you for also your commitment to the local church. I'm a big believer in the local church, that our faith needs community and to be expressed and lived out in the context of a local church. So thank you for that. Friends, I want you to find out more about Dr. Nathan Guy, and you can read his article at our website, equipradio.org. But maybe today you say, I believe. I have trusted in Christ. If that's you, dial the number 888-NEED-HIM. Or maybe you have questions about Christianity and the claims of the Christian faith. Dial 888-NEED-HIM. And until we're together again next time, as always, remember, Equip with Chris Brooks is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Bible Institute.